You have made the argument very strongly that the United States has been pushed into something not in its own national interest by pressure from Israel and the lobbying power of Israel.
Well, it has been. The question is whether the person who makes the ultimate decision, who would be President Trump, should have pushed back. That's it. Of course, Trump should have pushed back.
So Tucker Carlson sat down with the Economist for an interview about Israel. That was with Zanny Minton Beddoes. But he didn't just accept what she asked, he questioned her framing, which is an enormous relief. So often people come in with very dishonest, disingenuous framing. And in case you don't know what that means, there's an old question that they talk about in law schools as a good example of how to set someone up with bad framing. You ask them, when did you stop beating your wife? Well, wait a minute, if you were never beating your wife, what do you mean, when did I stop beating my wife? That assumes that I'm already guilty, right? So, and that is exactly what the press does to protect Israel. And Tucker's gonna talk about some of that framing, and I'm gonna talk about it as we show you the parts of the interview. And already there, he's talking about Israel's influence. They have a huge lobby in this country. And reporters in America, and this is from England, but same thing. No, it's not the same thing actually. It's much worse in America, but it also happens in the British press and the European press as well. You ask them, hey, do the oil companies have influence when they give a tremendous amount of money to our politicians? Yes. Big pharmaceutical companies, well, yes, obviously. Big banks, defense contractors, yes. Israel, no, you anti-Semite, how dare you? Wait, are you crazy? What do you mean? So Israel is the one lobby that doesn't affect politicians at all, and that in fact, if you suggest that they do, that you somehow hate Jewish people. So they're exempt from the regular rules of humanity and physics and politics? No, that's absurd. You're making a special exception for Israel, right? We're not saying that only the Israeli lobby has influence, all the lobbies have influence. This is super obvious unless you're a legacy media reporter and you just can't seem to figure out anything wrong with Israel ever. So, but let's give you more from the interview.
I think it is a disaster for the future of Israel, a disaster for the Palestinian people, a horror, 70,000 people dead.
Why would you describe it first as a disaster for the future of Israel? You've got tens of thousands of civilians murdered, but it's foremost a disaster for the future of Israel. No, it's foremost a disaster for the families of the dead kids.
Absolutely, I made 3 points.
Because everybody sucks up to Israel in this way that suggests they're afraid. And everyone is afraid, and you know that. Everyone's like, the real problem is calling people anti-Semites allows real anti-Semites to flourish. It's like, no, actually the real problem with calling people anti-Semites who aren't is accusing the innocent of a crime they didn't commit. And the real crime in Gaza is killing people who did nothing wrong. So those are the real problems, I would say. But no one can say it because you have to be like, oh no, but really October 7th.
I don't know what you're talking about, Gaza. We're having a
everyone watching this knows what I'm talking about.
Yeah, so look, I like that Tucker challenged her on the real problem in Gaza is how it hurts Israel. I mean, God, they say it with a straight face. It's amazing. But it's not to say that her point is wrong. This is one of the less offensive things that happened in the interview. So they're talking about Gaza in that case, and Tucker challenges her framing on it. They're both right. By far the number one problem is the well over 72,000 Palestinians that were killed by Israel, including over 20,000, now approaching 30,000 children that were killed. So that is an enormous problem. It's a genocide. But she's not wrong that it creates a second problem that is, and Tucker's right, much less important, but also real, which is that, yes, it also hurts Israel. Why do you want to be seen as genocidal maniacs? How does that help your country? And how does it help your country to expose yourselves as fascists that are constantly taking more and more of their neighbor's land while pretending to do self-defense? In fact, if you're curious about that, that's because the media has infected your brain with Israeli propaganda, and they've made it seem like Israel is the victims. I'm gonna show you a map in a couple of minutes here that shows you that's not true at all. All they've done is attack their neighbors over and over again and taken more and more of their land. But the whole time, back to Tucker's point, we're having a conversation, but wait. What helps Israel? What hurts Israel? Oh, Israel, Palestinians, who cares? October 7th, she said, is a horror, the horrors of October 7th. True enough, definitely. And we talked about it instantly on the Young Turks and we condemned it, it was terrible. Then Israel did 70 October 7s. But when you're talking about Israel, it's never the horrors of what Israel's done. There's a collateral damage, using human shields, talking point. But back to Israel. Has this hurt Israel at all to slaughter all those people? Yes, it's also hurt Israel. But they can't see straight, right? Because they think, it doesn't matter. They've been taught, they've been brainwashed their whole lives, if you live in Israel, that the whole world hates you. Everyone's an anti-Semite. So if someone is criticizing you, you didn't do anything wrong. There's nothing wrong with genocides as long as you do it. There's nothing wrong with attacking all your neighbors and taking their land. God told you need to create greater. No, the only reason why anyone is criticizing you is because they're anti-Semites. The whole rest of the world is hateful. So keep doing exactly what you're doing because you're golden and moral and wonderful. It's the rest of the world that's filled with hate, that's bothered by you slaughtering these people and taking their land when everyone knows it's self-defense. Like people in Israel absolutely, positively believe that. They don't realize they live in a fascist state. They think that they live in this besieged state. Oh no, do we have a right to exist? Which brings us to the next clip. Let's watch.
Given that Israel's right to exist, would you consider yourself a Zionist in that narrow definition?
What does that mean, a right to exist?
The existence of the political state of Israel as
but it has existed. A right, what does that mean? The phrase you used was devised by the Israeli government. Of course, does it have a right to exist? And so my question to you would be, what does that mean?
Why don't you answer my question? It's a very simple question.
I don't know what your question is. Are you asking, does it have a right to exist? Or do I want it to exist? Do I seek its destruction?
Fine, answer it that way.
Well, of course I don't seek its destruction. I've already said, as you know, because I said it to you, I don't want Israel to be destroyed or have to use nuclear weapons.
We've established that you are in that narrow terms of Zionist. If that's how
I'm in no sense a Zionist. I don't want any country to be destroyed at all, and I don't want people to die, particularly ones who committed no crime, because I don't believe in killing innocents.
Yeah, so this whole thing about every time you see someone in the media or in politics, as we covered last week with Josh Shapiro, Governor Shapiro of Pennsylvania, starting with, Israel has a right to exist. Understand that that is propaganda. It is a trick. They know that it's a trick, and they do it anyway to insult our intelligence. Why do I say that? Israel already does exist. They have Iron Dome, literally no other country does, a defensive shield for them. They have nukes, very few countries have nukes. They have a military that just showed you that they could defeat all the other militaries in the Middle East by themselves. So a dominant military with nukes and special protection Iron Dome and the backing of the United States of America and almost all the Western countries. Whether they exist or not is not at all in question. They most definitively exist and they're not going in anywhere. They're not going anywhere and they're completely and utterly dug in. That is a fake question. The real question is, do the Palestinians have a right to exist? Because Palestine doesn't exist. So when you're talking about this issue, they don't want you to talk about the actual victims, the Palestinians, who were slaughtered in 48 and in first round of ethnic cleansing called the Nakba. And that's the catastrophe because 750,000 Palestinians were driven not just from their land, but from their actual homes. They slaughtered them and they moved them and they pushed them out and they grabbed that land. And they did it again in 1967. They had brutally attacked all of their neighbors, claiming this new idea of preemptive war. We prevent the war by starting the war. Fascism 101. What did the Germans say? We need breathing space. What is Israel saying right now as they're taking southern Lebanon? We need a buffer zone. They just took buffer zone after buffer zone, and no one in American media asked, do the Palestinians have a right to exist? Does Palestine have a right to exist? Does southern Lebanon have a right to exist? Does the Golan Heights have a right to exist? No. All they asked was, does Israel have a right to exist? because they are purposely trying to trick you and manipulate you into believing that Israel is the victim and the Palestinians are the aggressors. Oh, those Arab and Muslim savages, all they understand is violence. No one has spread more bigotry against Muslims and Arabs in the West than the Western press. The media, the so-called journalists, the so-called reporters have been viciously bigoted towards Muslims to the point, guys, here I can prove it for you. How many times have you heard the question, does Israel have a right to exist, in the media? I've heard it hundreds of times. My guess is most of you have heard it either dozens or hundreds of times. And always accusatory, as if like the person being asked the question is about to murder all of the people inside Israel. Does Israel have a right to exist? You dirty anti-Semite, is the inference of that question, right? And every time everybody says, yeah, of course they have a right to exist, but they've already been framed as guilty. When did you stop beating your wife, right? We already know you're beating your wife. We already know you hate Jews, but does Israel have a right to exist? I got you. You had to say yes. I didn't have to say yes. I said yes because I don't. Those people are already there. We can't move them. What are we going to do? Kill them? That's crazy. We're against killing. We're against war. We're for peace. But the liars in media make it seem like somehow we're on the other side. Oh, do you want to destroy Israel? Literally, no one said destroy Israel. Tucker Carlson never said it. Megyn Kelly never said it. I never said it. No one has ever said that in American media, and yet they always ask that question hundreds of times. Now, let me ask you. How many times have you heard on cable news or anywhere in American media, does Palestine have a right to exist? I have it at approximately 0. And these guys say, we're the unbiased ones. They say, we in the mainstream media are unbiased and objective. In fact, we're the only objective people. If you hear news anywhere online or anywhere else, remember, don't listen to them because they're biased. Are you kidding me? I've never seen anyone more biased than the traditional legacy media in this country. Disgustingly biased. Okay, so I promised you the map. I do have one more Tucker clip, but first let's look at the map. Because this is the map of Israel and Palestine, and let's see how it developed over the years. Well, first, it starts out with Israel having, first it starts out with just Palestine, right? And at that point, 6% of that land is owned by Jewish folks. Boom, they get 48% right out of the gate. So well, how are they gonna get all that land? There's people live in those homes all over, right? In what was the green area, now is the blue area. The blue area is Israel, green area is now the much smaller homeland of the Palestinians. What happened to all those homes? Well, they were driven, they were slaughtered. They were driven into those smaller green areas. That's the second from the left as you're looking at it. Well, then Israel attacked again and again and again, and now 53% of Gaza, the small green area, is gone. That's part of Israel. And now the West Bank has been chopped into many different pieces, and Area C has been annexed by Israel, and a giant portion of even that tiny little West Bank in Gaza have been now borged, taken over by Israel. And then you've got Golan Heights, now you've got southern Lebanon, you've got western Syria, and then Israel continues to expand and expand and expand. Meanwhile, everyone in American media is saying, poor Israel, they're the victims. All they were doing was attacking their neighbors, killing them and taking their land. They're the victim, don't they have a right to exist? No, they have a right to exist. They don't have a right to attack other people. They don't have a right to take other people's land. That is not a right that exists in the world. But they demand it. And look, I'm looking forward to cable news anchors and others in the media finally asking the question, does Palestine have a right to exist? Because it's obvious that our entire mainstream media hates the Palestinians, are deeply bigoted against them and racist against them. And they think Palestine existing, who cares? I care so little about that it doesn't even cross my mind. There's 5.5 million prisoners that Israel is holding in open air camps in West Bank and Gaza. And our media has shown absolutely no interest or sympathy in those Palestinians. Every single question is framed to help Israel. while they pretend to be objective. Okay, one last clip from the interview.
A right to exist? Does the United States have a right to exist?
There was a world order built up after 1945 which suggested that aggression should not be condoned into countries. That countries with borders have the right to intervene.
I totally agree with that.
Okay.
Which is why the first thing that Israel did within 2 weeks of this war starting, which is supposedly existential for them, was take southern Lebanon, take someone else's country, as they have done repeatedly. And no one even mentions that. And so I guess I would be opposed to that because I think Lebanon has a right to exist. I thought Gaza had a right to exist. But I noticed that as soon as we started portioning rights, only one country gets them.
No, I did not say that. You're absolutely putting words into my mouth.
So because I believe, here's what I do believe, since you asked. I believe in universally applicable standards. And if they're not universally applicable, they're not standards, they're preferences.
So Turks Carlson is 100% right on this. And don't tell me that he's worse than mainstream media. I just saw him being way better than mainstream media. And Zanny Minton Beddoes, you implicitly are saying that. Because did you ask about the atrocities of Israel in southern Lebanon? No. Did anybody in mainstream media even talk about the atrocities? Do you know that they're bombing the bridges so that the Lebanese cannot come back into their homes? Do you know that, as we told you, that they took 53% of Gaza and they're never going to return it? Well, you wouldn't know any of that if you watch junk like the Economist interview here or any of the junk in our media, because they never tell you that, because they're not concerned about the Lebanese. They're not concerned about the Palestinians, because they're deeply racist and they work for Israel. So they tell you, well, Israel, how about you? Are you concerned? Do they have a right to exist? Should they have double Iron Dome, quadruple Iron Dome? Should they have all the nukes in the world? Shouldn't America give them, they've only given them 330 billion. Shouldn't they give them 380 billion, 400 billion, 800 billion? Israel. But I'm not biased. Please spare me. You people are the most biased propagandists in the history of the world. Previous fascist governments that did genocides wish they had the propaganda machine that mainstream media in the West is for Israel. Because then the Germans would have said they were the victims. And our entire press would have said, oh, the poor Germans, they had to take the Sudetenland. Because they did it as a preemptive war for self-defense. This is sickening. It's sickening when the Germans do it to the Jews. It's sickening when the Israelis do it to the Palestinians. It's sickening under any circumstance when we are forced to pay for a genocide, and now we're forced to pay for yet another war that Israel wants. But anytime that we go to talk about the war or any of these abuses, the media doesn't ask and doesn't care about Palestinians or Lebanese or Syrians or Iranians to mainstream media in the West. Those are dirty Muslims. Those are useless, worthless Arabs. And their lives don't count at all. The only lives that count are the super precious golden Israelis. And every question has to be asked from their perspective and how to protect the precious, precious golden Israelis. The Arabs and the Muslims, who cares about them? And you will see that I am right going forward, not just in the past. The past is evident. You can go watch all of those clips on cable news, all of those on television and the networks. And you will never find them caring about the Palestinians, never, or anyone else in the Middle East. All you'll hear is Israeli propaganda day in and day out. But let's go to the future. So how do I know what's going to happen in the future? I know it because there's a script. If there was no script and there was no propaganda, then you couldn't possibly know the future. But I guarantee you, you could watch the American press for the next, make up a number, 2 weeks, a month. I mean, an enormous amount of time, right? Where Israel is invading southern Lebanon. And you will get no stories about it. You will not get any stories about the vicious invasion of Lebanon and how they've cleared out, displaced 1 million people. So they did ethnic cleansing again. Did you know that? Did ABC, CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, did any of them talk about, oh my God, the Israelis just did ethnic cleansing again, this time in southern Lebanon? No, they haven't, and they won't, because they work for Israel. They see that and they go, that's Gaza. That's what Israel did to Gaza. That is If that's not genocidal, you don't have eyes and ears, and you're a sick person if you support doing that to civilians. And all the sick, disgusting people in our media see that and go, poor Israel. No, objective. What a joke. What a brilliant piece of propaganda to take the most biased people in the country and pretend they're the only objective ones. Thank you to Tucker Carlson for doing that aggressive interview where he asked logical questions and stated facts and made the reporter look absolutely foolish, because she is. And we're all, on behalf of all the people, not just in America and the West, but the whole world, we tell the Western press, we're sick of you. We're sick of your bias. We're sick of you constantly defending and doing propaganda for Israel. Can you for once actually care about people in America, people in Europe, other people in the Middle East, and go, hey, should the Europeans pay for this? Should the Americans pay for this? No, only thing you care about is Israel. And we just can't stand it anymore. You deserve the loathing that the people of the world heap on top of you, because you are not journalists, you're the exact opposite. You don't cover the news, you cover up the news on behalf of your beloved, precious Israel. Young Turks.
Every time you ring the bell below, an angel gets his wings. Totally not true, but it does keep you updated on our live shows.